Next up is Mr. Tom Farrell, who's going to be showing us something that's really a neat model. Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I had an unusual model perhaps this evening. I'm going to show you a boat that I built. Okay, so there's a kit maker out there called Frenchman River Model Works. They make resin kits, and they're extremely detailed. They're very nice, and they build up very quickly. I did this in about 4 days on a rush program. And it comes in a nice little box, and you can build it 2 different ways. You can build it with the wheelhouse forward on the boat or on the rear. Of course, you can paint it any color you like. I chose to build this one, or this version of it. It's really just a question of where you place the wheelhouse. So this is in O scale, and like I say, it's a resin kit. So this is the main 2 pieces of the kit. You know, resin kits in general aren't difficult to build. It's really all about painting them up. And like I indicated, these have an extreme amount of detail molded into them. Typically, resin kits frequently have more detail than a styrene kit. As you'll see, every wooden plank, all the wood grain just shows up marvelously on this kit. And it just made a really nice model. This was the first couple of materials that I used to paint a resin kit or even a styrene kit. You typically want to use a primer, and I just use these spray bombs because I don't have my airbrush going. But I use this automotive primer. It's just a gray. I wanted a light color because I'm painting the bulk of the boat white. And I used this paint before. This Krylon chalky finish is a really nice effect for our modeling. This chalky finish is, well, chalky. It's better than flat. It just has a nice weathered look to it right off the get-go. And resin kits have to be assembled with cyanoacrylate, the CA super glues. So I use this medium, well, it's extra thick, and I use a tiny bit of the super thin, and this is the zip kicker, which is the accelerator. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this stuff. The first thing you do is you examine these parts for flash. Now I have to say that on this particular kit, this was about the only flash on that hull of the boat. This is where the anchor comes out on the bow of the boat. So just with an X-Acto knife and a standard blade, I just carved that out. Just took no time at all. And there was really no additional flash on that hull at all. It was ready to go. Before I started to paint this with those rattle cans, I thoroughly washed all the parts with like a Dawn dish soap and an old toothbrush. I couldn't tell that there was any mold release on the model, but I did this just as a precaution anyway. It's recommended on the instructions, and all resin kits, this is typically what you do. Then you just let it dry, and then you can, I just took it to the garage, and with my Rust-Oleum auto primer, the gray, I just sprayed it in each direction, north, south, east, west, and straight down. I let it dry overnight, which isn't really necessary, but just as an added precaution. These are the other resin parts. This is the, as you'll see, the fish well. There's 3 wells in the boat, and one is for the wheelhouse, and there's 2 for these fish wells. There was a tiny bit of flashing here. I just took a fingernail file and just went out around here and filed that off. And then I gave it the finished color. So this is looking down at the hull of the boat. And what I did is I went with my X-Acto knife and I scraped around the perimeter of this well so that when I inserted my wheelhouse, it super glued it on there. The super glue wasn't, it was resin to resin. It wasn't resin to paint. I think that's just good practice. I elected to use red for my trim and this white as touch-up. These are acrylic paints. They're very inexpensive. They're basically harmless. They don't have any vapors that can bother you. This is my standby. It's not actually Micromark tie and bridge stain anymore. It's my own mix. I put about, I'd say, to this line of Black India ink, and then I fill it with isopropyl alcohol, and I just use the bottle. It's just a handy little bottle. And for the fish wells inside the hull, I use this poly paint. It's water-based. I use railroad tie brown. So these are the next round of paints for the model. So in here's where that railroad brown was painted. And then this is the beginning of that red. It's purposely weathered. Like I painted it just with a brush, and I just tried to highlight it. So, and then I went back with the white. I wanted it to have a real weathered look. I think I got mission accomplished there. There is two lines here. There's, of course, the perimeter here of the top of the hull. And then there's a racing stripe along here. And then there's a rope below the molded in below that ridge line. I took this railroad tie brown and just with a brush, as you'll see, I just painted that rope. Next up, I was going to do the wheelhouse roof, and this was the colors I used to rust the roof. These are various manufacturers, but they're all just rust colors: dark rust, light rust, some sort of orange, and then this Vallejo wash. It's a nice standby. So what I do is I work from light to dark. So I put down my light colors first, which would be this light rust, and then I move left to right, and then I put in the, well, you'll see. So this is the effect I'm looking for. So I started with the perimeter here with just a light rust color. Then I layered the next color on after it was dry, and so forth and so on, stippling the paint on with basically a brush that the bristles were quite short, and I just stippled it on there. And, I'm trying to get a decrepit look here. This is a metal casting here. That's just primed it with a gray primer, an old Flocal primer, and then I hit it with that same red acrylic paint. And that's the Searchlight. You also see the rust colors on these hinges and all these other components. Remember, and there's that brown rope. That's it's really quite easy to paint with a very fine brush, just right across it. You also see where I've begun the weathering process. I put my first alcohol wash on here. I actually used an interesting technique I never did before. When I just painted the acrylic wash on there, I wasn't getting the effect that I wanted. So I took a foam, piece of foam that looked like a foam brush that you could get at Lowe's or Home Depot, and I stippled, just with the wet alcohol wash, I just stippled the decking and everything with the foam foam pad. Very nice effect. It eliminated any brush marks on there. There's the other side of the boat. That looks pretty rusty to me. It came off, nice effect. Yeah. This all looks beat to hell, which was just the effect that I was going for. These are some of the detail parts. These are the doors that go above the fishing wells where they put the fish. This is the netting. They give you this string and these little beads. I just put these beads on. I super glued them in place. Oops. I super glued them in place here. And once I had built 2 of these assemblies, I simply took this line of floats and I just glued it on either end of this netting. This netting is nothing more than a gauze that they give you. And I was trying to figure out how to paint it or color that gauze because it comes white, of course, while I was drinking my coffee. And then I had this brainstorm, why not just put it in the coffee? So that's what I did. I took the gauze. When I was just about done with my coffee, I soaked it up in the gauze. Then I spread the gauze out onto my workbench, and in a couple hours it was dry. Then I glued these things onto the gauze. So that was a dark coffee Verona roast, in case anybody wants to know. This is the most difficult part of the entire kit. See this little ring? You have to have the eyes and hands of a surgeon to put this on. Luckily, they give you you only need about 4 of these, but they give you about 8 of them. The reason they do is because this is about 3 times as big as it actually is. I mean, it is tiny. The first thing you have to do is separate this little brass ring. I developed a nice technique for that using 2 dental tools and pushing it apart after I sprung one off into outer space. Then I looped it in here, put the chain on, and squeezed it together. This anchor was the easiest one to use, this little ring. You'll see the rigging was quite challenging using these tiny little rings. I'll show you later. The paint for the winches and the block pulleys, I used this gunmetal gray, this oily steel, and old silver. I used the old silver where there was any metal on metal, like the anchor chain running across the winch, that would be shining. So I used this old silver, and then everything out around it, I used these colors. Throughout the process of painting, I typically spray the model with dull coat. This keeps the paints from blending together. So I'll do some initial weathering, for example, with that alcohol wash, or and I'll spray the whole model with dull coat. Then I'll do some more weathering, and it probably has 3 or 4 coats of dull coat on it. Keeps the paint from running together. And here was the biggest challenge. There's a little tiny ring here. This was very difficult. I got it done, but it was difficult. This is the first piece of rigging. I simply, with a pin vise and a little drill bit, I drilled a hole through the front of this bow. I super glued the end of this string, this rope, in there, stretched it tight, tied a knot up there, and super glued that closed. Next up was putting this on, as we discussed. They give you a red and green light. These are little beads, red, right, returning. So this goes on the, hold on. Sorry. So I super glued these on each corner. There's a red one and a green one over here. Here's the winch. And there's another winch here. These masts are also resin. I initially had them white. They didn't really look right, so I painted them red, this weathered red. This life preserver is also looks like it was made out of styrene. I had to clean up these penetrations here, these holes with an X-Acto knife. I painted the rope with that railroad tie brown, painted this all white, and then with a fine brush went in and painted the red lines. So like I said, these resin kits are all about the painting. They're very simple to put together. These are those fish bay doors. I had the brainstorm to have them propped up with a piece of wood. So on either side is a piece of wood. And instead of using another identical set over here, I created my own lids here. I just wanted a little variation in the look of this thing. So I built two of these and glued them on just for different look. You can see how the model is coming together. Again, it's all about the painting, really. Here we are with the rigging, which this took about a half a day to do, mainly because of these tiny little rings. It's just insane. And there's the green light, just super glued in there. There's my netting. There's actually, they give you fish that I painted silver. You can't see them, so if you build this, don't bother. But there's a bunch of fish in there that nobody can see. And here's the anchor, painted, and there's a little chain that runs over the winch, drops down into this penetration, into the bow of the ship. It's looking down. Oh, see these fuzzies? Normally, I burn these off with a gas grill lighter, and that's what I did here. I burned it off, and that string burned like it was made out of gasoline. So that didn't work this time. So I'm going to go back and take all this rigging. I'm going to hit it with like a clear, flat paint, and hopefully that'll make these go down. It didn't take much to I mean, I was pretty successful burning them off, and then all of a sudden it just caught fire, and basically I had well, wasn't going to burn the house down, but it destroyed the rigging. I did this one because it was the simplest one to rig. I didn't want to go through the hassle. If it did burn through, I didn't want to have to do this one again. It's my favorite photo of the group. This really shows the detail that's cast into this resin model. It's just terrific. That's about 3 or 4 times magnification. But this guy, Frenchman River Model Works, his name's James Cleveland. He didn't miss a beat with this. This thing is just superbly detailed. The toolkit, just everything about it's just really high quality. You can see the nail holes in the deck and the distressed wood. That's all molded in. That's why I say the art of these resin kits is all about the painting of them. These are my doors. There's the netting. I added some algae. Just dabbed this with a paintbrush and some green paint. There's a close-up of some of that, the rusting. So I put a heavier, darker rust around the perimeter was the idea. There's some remnants of paint left here. Another shot of the, there's a good one of the light. Makes for a very nice model, I'll say that. They're worth the money. They're a bargain.
Looks
Very
fantastic.
attractive.
It
Very
really does.
attractive. Yeah, it's really attractive kit.
It's
And
something really different too. I haven't seen anything like that before.
and it uses my tried and true techniques of just alcohol washes, make you look like a hero. So it's primed, painted with the chalk white, hit with the alcohol washes, and then trimmed out with your color. It could be green, blue, red, whatever you like, and then little scratching here and nice technique. And this is where it's going to go. This is my little shanty town. None of these buildings are in place yet. These are all just placeholders. But I couldn't cast my river, so I had this fishing boat done. So I couldn't. So next I'll start putting these buildings in place permanently, and then I'll cast my river. And if you remember from an earlier show, behind this covered bridge is my dam. There's a little of it there. So this was the holdup here, and it's going to be a real nice little scene when it's all done.
Fantastic, fantastic, Tom. You really ought to be proud of that.
It's a beautiful model, and Frenchman River Model Works. And Jim, I think you might want to tell them what we might do in January, huh?
Yeah, we're going to be doing, or Tom's going to be doing a build along of a lobster boat. And then on shore, there's another kit that they make called Lobster Shack. This Lobster Shack is really a nicely detailed kit. It's where I guess the lobstermen repaired their nets and cages and all of that they use to catch the lobster. So it really is, you get the ship model at a discount plus the Lobster Shack at a discount. And this is the first time we've ever tried to build two kits to in effect create a small industry for a model railroad. And I think it's really going to be something different. And Tom said that he'd like to do it, so he's going to build it in O scale. It's going to also be available in HO scale for anybody in that area. And it'll be announced in my next magazine article.
All right. Any questions?
This is Jeff Jordan. I got a couple of comments and questions for you on the boat. First off, a tip on the rigging from someone who's done a lot of ship models. Consider getting a little chunk of beeswax and running the lines through beeswax. That will both get rid of the fuzz and it gives the line a little bit of body so that it doesn't sag.
What can I do now?
It's an old ship model builder's technique. Two other things. One, I see the windows for landlubbers, the lights in the cabin are fogged. Did you set out to fog them?
Yeah,
or otherwise that's an artifact of the super glue.
No, I sprayed it with the dull coat because I didn't want to detail like everything. I hate doing the insides of things. So I just hit it with dull coat. That's what we got.
So they're dirty and you just can't see the inside. I really like the way the roof came out on the cabin. I think the rust effect is just really authentic. One nitpick for you, typically on a boat with a wooden deck, a working boat, you wouldn't paint the deck. It'd be too slippery. You would leave it bare teak and it would turn gray if it's not well finished or not finished or waxed or cleaned, but the paint would make it slippery.
Should I go back and make it wood?
Put more gray on it. Yeah, make it look like weathered teak.
All right. Thanks for the extra work.
15 years in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I know something about boats.
I'll go back with make it look like a weathered wood, like a gray. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So obviously, they would not be spending a lot of time working on the finish on this boat and keeping it "quote unquote" ship shape. So weathered wood would be the appearance of that deck.
All right, I'll go back and do that.
But great model.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? That was a great tip on the beeswax, because it was burning off just nicely and then it just burst into flames. You know? Oh, well. Anything
Tom,
else?
thank you so very much. We really
Okay.
appreciate it.
Yep, thanks.
See you next week.